Good evening, everybody. It's very nice to see you, whether you're watching live or in post. I hope you're all doing very well. It's been quite some time. A lot has happened since the last time myself and Sam did a stream. The last time being after we beat Watford. A very nice evening, you know. We've had a few dodgy ones since. We'll be talking about that, of course. Um, we were scheduled in for, I think, 6:30, weren't we? But then Liverpool and Chelsea thought, no, we're not going to score goals that count because, football. And that whole thing, which we're going to have to talk about for at least a minute, because what on earth has just happened? For a 0-0, what a game, by the way. But first and foremost, Samuel, my friend, how be you?
Yeah, good. Excited to be back. Feels like I might not be on top form because it feels like it's been forever since I made that slightly forced cameo after the Watford game because I was very keen to get in on the act after probably Norwich's best game of the season. Yeah, not quite in the same situation this time, are we? Feels slightly different, but I'm glad we've got 2 days rest from that Southampton game. I didn't actually watch it live, and was greeted by basically tweets from you and Gary Gowers. So I saw those tweets before I saw the score, and I thought this was about half time, and I thought, what is going on? I thought I was going to consult Sky Sports for sort of a 4-0, 5-0 halftime score, but it was only 1-0. Just the performance was pretty appalling. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that. Nothing more pleasurable than discussing yet another Premier League loss and underwhelming performance for Norwich. We're very used to it, so yeah, should be back to the old formula straight away.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty routine for us now at this point, isn't it, to talk about Norwich not being very good. We thought we'd broken the mould. No, we're still here, but it's fine. That is life as a Norwich City fan. Just quickly on the Chelsea game, what on earth did you make of that? So for a 0-0, as I said, that was, I thought, a really good game, and the whole Kepa thing. In fact, let's not talk about the game, just the Kepa thing. What do you make about that? Because it seemed like a semi-sweet narrative that he could redeem himself, but he's let in 11 penalties and then skied the last one.
Yeah,
How do you come back from that?
yeah. I mean, he's going to become sort of notorious as the worst ever League Cup final player by quite some distance. After the whole palaver of the last one and not coming off, I think that was his last one. Um, a few years ago, and then yeah, like you said, seemed like the sort of nice narrative. He comes back, wins a game for Chelsea, but he's literally done the opposite. Probably the worst substitution of all time. Um, and just watching the penalties going in, I was thinking Tim Krul would have had 4 or 5 of these, to be honest. And to bring on an expert keeper and for him to put in the performance that he did, especially given, and this will sort of go under the radar because of how incredibly he missed that last one, but he had a full hand on a penalty, sort of 2 penalties ago, Canate's penalty, and it just went in. So yeah, the narrative was probably the opposite of what it could have been, and I do feel for him a little bit, but in another way, I'm a neutral, so sort of just fun.
Yeah, it is funny for us, but also, yeah, you're right. You have to just kind of be like, oof, hard one to take, champ. Good luck for whatever happens next, because ooh, I don't know how you come back from that. I don't. Anyway, we don't care. It's Liverpool, Chelsea. Who cares? Little old Norwich. Let's talk about that. So the last time we spoke, Watford. Since then, in terms of positive results, as you can see on the little running order below, let's start on a positive and let's just go full on and then straight back down. So let's start with, was it Wolves in the Cup and then Palace? FA Cup, quick word on that. Stay up and win the Cup, focus on the Cup. Where do we sit? I mean, we had this discussion as Norwich fans, didn't we? Literally last time we were in the Premier
Yeah.
League. Has your opinion changed or anything given the current context?
Um, I think my opinion is just give whatever you can to Norwich fans for the rest of the season. Just, I mean, it's pretty. I've not really committed to either side there, but if I was Dean Smith, as much as he won't want to accept relegation, there are obviously 2 big games coming up against Brentford and Leeds. Um, I think the only way to really try and make amends for this season is to just try and get as many wins as possible. I think going into that Liverpool game, yes, on paper it's a trip to a fantastic team and the League Cup winners, but also they have just won the League Cup. It will be 3 days since by the time Norwich arrive at Anfield, and I think Liverpool may well be for the taking. You don't know what sort of changes Jurgen Klopp will make to the team. I'm sure now that he's won the League Cup, he won't be supremely desperate to get the old FA Cup and League Cup double. And it might be an opportunity for Norwich to do what they can. I'm not saying Norwich are going to win the cup, and they should make up for relegation by gifting the fans a tidy FA Cup, but I just think just try and give them whatever sort of hope, whatever sort of nice away days and happy moments they can. Like that Tottenham. I'm thinking Tottenham away in 2020. That season on the whole was pretty depressing for most Norwich fans, but that's a moment that will probably last in the minds of a lot of Norwich fans for a long time. So if they can try and create as many of those as possible, that would be my aim if I was within Norwich City at the moment.
Yeah, I'm going to sit on the side of just go for it as much as you can for Norwich City, because I'm sure, we can sit here and say go for the cup, but it's Norwich. Let's not forget that. Liverpool has been a team that I've not enjoyed playing. Well, I've not played against them. I've not enjoyed watching Norwich play against. They've really caused some trauma this season. I mean, they have in the past many a time, which is no surprise given that they've done it again. You look at Carrow Road on the opening day of the season, not really fussed about that. But then in the Carabao Cup, the cup they've just won, as you said, God, that was turgid, wasn't it? And then very recently, a game we'll talk about again, at Anfield, for 60 minutes, Norwich were brilliant. And then it just kind of, Liverpool thought, yeah, come on, we fancy winning now. Yeah. So let's go and win, which is a massive shame. And as you said, I think you're right. There is the possibility that a weakened squad, remember Liverpool's D team beat us at Carrow Road, could be fielded against Norwich during the week. And hopefully that's the case. I fancy it. I do fancy a little FA Cup run again. You mentioned the Spurs game. That was a magical night. To most teams, a fifth round FA Cup win won't mean much, especially to the bigger teams. But for little old Norwich, it was a really special night at a wonderful stadium as well. Sadly, didn't quite get the spotlight I was hoping it would in the Amazon Prime Spurs documentary. They kind of glossed over it. But, that happens, doesn't it? Palace, which a very forgettable game. Can we move on from that? Because very meh.
Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, I'd just say an opportunity missed. I think at the time, a lot of fans were saying could be a valuable point. But I think the results since then have put that into context as a game that Norwich could and should have won. Not a great performance, to be honest. I think from what I remember, obviously it was a little while ago now, from what I remember, a fair-ish performance in the first half, a lot of effort, a lot of running, and then second half just super passive and allowed a lot of those sorts of moments like what Zaha created for the goal, and an opportunity missed, especially with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, the things I remember from that game, probably 2, maybe 3 things. One, Zaha's penalty was the worst penalty I've ever seen taken. I genuinely think it's worse than Kepa's today. I initially thought before seeing it back after the game, because it was right at the other end to me, I thought, all right, Gunny's got a hand to that. That's why it's gone so far wide. But then you watch it back and, I mean, he scored an absolute worldie before, just to remind you that he's a very good player. But Jesus Christ, that was hilarious. And the other things that I was impressed with was the sort of, what am I looking for? Norwich nullified Conor Gallagher and Michael Elise. Like, they weren't in the game at all. They were completely passive, which I thought was good. True. But as you said, who else were passive? Norwich. And that's why we didn't win. I think there's a player I want to talk about, and maybe I'll use that as the first slightly negative point, who in that game I thought wasn't particularly great. He had his massive tackle on Zaha, but that's Max Aarons. So let's move on to maybe the lows, we'll call it, and we'll start off on something that I don't know the general consensus of, which is Max Aarons' performance specifically. I don't think he's been very good lately, especially when it comes to defending. Whoever he's playing against, the caveat being Sterling, Mane, Zaha, but he just seems to keep giving them too much time, and crosses seem to keep coming into the box, and more often than not, you're going to concede from those positions. Kyle Walker-Peters the other night absolutely schooled him, which makes me wonder how disappointed I would be to see Max Aarons leave in the summer. And it makes me wonder how much a team would be willing to pay, because the price Norwich were demanding before, 35, 40 million? No team's getting anywhere near that now, are they? So I do wonder about that. What do you make of Max Aarons? And don't get me wrong, I still love him, but as of late, my hands are going crazy here. Jesus.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think he's struggled in recent weeks, especially defensively, and I've always thought that defensively he's quite underrated as a player. I think because he's a young sort of quick fullback, I think he often gets branded as a purely attacking player when I haven't seen that a lot of the time. But he has looked really frail defensively actually recently, and that was a worry for me. Just sort of individual defending was the main issue. Sort of Zaha and Sterling, like you said, they just had too much for him. They just had too many tricks, too many ideas to get past him, and Aaron's just didn't have the. I don't want to say athleticism, because I think he is an athlete and he is physically capable, but he just seemed mentally he seemed a second behind the rest of them. And I think that exposed some weaknesses that, like you say, will probably shave a little bit off the asking price. But I think it's looking more and more like he might stay. And I think I may have said this about Emi Buendia at some point last season, so I don't want to get too carried away. But there is no lack of quality at right back in England at the moment, and there are plenty of options to choose from. I just wonder, from Max Aaron's own point of view, he'll probably be disappointed, because I think he's probably fallen below quite a few of the various options that clubs will have in that position to choose from, and that's probably not going to do wonders for his own personal career. So we'll see how that develops. But yeah, I don't see him going for 30, 35 million anymore, and I don't see him going to the likes of Man United and Tottenham, or well, certainly not Barcelona, like he was linked with before. Well, actually, I don't. Barcelona's whole process is very, very difficult to understand, so I don't want to say it. They may well come back into him at some stage.
It's very straightforward. It's just a game of how much can we take the mick before you tell us to F off, essentially. That is the Barcelona transfer method, which is just kind of funny until it's then your club, to which it's then insulting. It's a good comment, Paul. Bring Byram in, give Max a break. I wouldn't be opposed to it. Sam Byram is, let's not go crazy. He's not the best, but just a pretty solid defender, a decent age as well. 26, 27 years old, probably just before his peak. Glad to see him back. The interview he did was magnificent, wasn't it? Where he sort of spoke about the context of his injury, what happened, how he dealt with it. He spoke about shutting himself off from people. And I know that when that injury happened, it's the same with Louis Thompson. You kind of think, as a person, this must be horrific. You've got the classic counter argument, oh, they get paid tens of thousands of it. That doesn't matter. When you can't do what you love in that context, especially when it is your job, it's horrible, but it's great to see him back. He's played here, there, and everywhere, it seems. I wonder when he's going to go up front, especially with Adam Idah out as well. So I wonder if we'll see that at any point. But I just, it's worth remembering Max Aarons is 22 years old. He's played a lot of football since he broke into the first team. He's not had a break, really, has he, at all? So maybe it's time for just a breather. I don't know about him being here next season. I feel like, in my head, it's a case of he's been told this season and then you can go, which, if we're going to want to sign players such as Mathias Normann, which we'll get into as we go back to the good news, that sale might have to be made. Let's touch on Norman then. Lead the way. What I know nothing about the event or what happened, but there was a quote saying he wanted to stay. That's about it.
Yeah, I believe at an event run by the Fans Social Club, he basically was asked if he wanted to stay, and he said yes. Then even if Norwich were relegated, he said yes. And that's fantastic for Norwich fans, and I think he's a lone player that a lot of people want to stay. Obviously, the large majority, I'd imagine. But I think it's worth putting into context that it's going to be very difficult for Norwich to spend the amount of money that they can buy Norman for if they get relegated to the Championship. And as fantastic as it is that he clearly likes being at Norwich, he likes the club, it may well be totally irrelevant by the time that option sort of expires. And I imagine there will be no shortage of suitors if Rostov are looking to move him on. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't want to. I've basically taken your one positive and sort of played it down to the max. But no, I would say the main positive for me regarding Mathias Normann is the fact that he's back from injury and might inspire Norwich to at least create a couple of chances. Ideally, score some goals and win some matches. But hopefully, he creates a couple of chances and then we'll go from there. But yeah, I think these quotes are something to get excited about, at least.
Yeah, it's a bit bleak, isn't it? It kind of was, but also wasn't tongue in cheek when you say it's a positive about Norman being back. All it's going to do is just make it more painful when he leaves. We can't afford him. We're not going to be able to afford him if we go down. That's the way the world works, especially Norwich City's world. I'm so willing to have egg on my face in however many months' time when he's signed permanently after we've been relegated, but it won't happen. Paul said Campbell out, Norman in. I'm not sure Bournemouth are going to want to buy Todd Campbell at the moment. Has he played much? I don't think he's played much.
I think he's played a little bit. I think he's been sort of starting for them a bit, but also Norwich did spend a lot of money in the summer, and I think it's going to be a case of trying to recoup money rather than just spending whatever comes in. Obviously the basic maths would be 11 million for Campbell, 11 million for Norman, but you have to remember Norwich will be a side going from Premier League income to Championship income, and they need to make up for that somehow. So I would be very, very surprised if Norwich get relegated, they are getting anywhere close to net zero spend on transfers in the summer.
Yeah, you mentioned there'll be clubs interested. I imagine there will be because he's not broken anymore. Well, at the moment, anyway. I think it must have been Sky. How did I watch the Liverpool game? The commentators kept saying that Norwich basically knew he was injured before they signed him. But now he's not. So you imagine if clubs know that he's not carrying a knock, that he's been fixed. You can clearly see technically the way he reads the game. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Can't run at all, but that doesn't matter when you've got the footballing brain. So yeah, you'd imagine clubs would be interested. Adam Idah injured for what is likely to be the rest of the season. Your thoughts on that? Really bleak news. Really, really bleak news.
Yeah, gutting for the club and gutting for the person, really. Just started to look like a serious option for Norwich's first team. And I know for a long time people have been willing him to get to that level and maybe have been slightly optimistic about flashes of brilliance at various times. But I genuinely think this was the moment when he was becoming if not a Premier League standard player, at least a Norwich City starting 11 standard player. And he had just started to hit that form, and you have to be gutted for him, really. That news must have been heartbreaking for him at a time when Pukki is the main guy and starts almost every single game. I think Idah was probably the only competition Pukki's really faced since arriving at Carrot Road. I know there was Jordan Rhodes in that first season, but he was only ever really there if Pukki was injured or suspended or as a second striker. So I think Idah was actually challenging him, to a lot of people's surprise. And he pushed his way up the pecking order. And yeah, gutting news for him also meant Norwich couldn't play the system that they had started to gain quite a lot from, that 4-4-2. Almost as soon as it had started to get them results, one of their key cogs was out of it, and now it's only Pukki and Sargent. And I think you can go with those two as a front two, but it worked as part of it to have a more physical, sort of aerially capable player on one of the wings. And if you put Sargent up front, there's not really an alternative to do that with. So yeah, it dismantled that for the team. It's obviously dismantled a lot for Adam Idah's career, and yeah, just bad news all round, really. Apart from for the likes of Brentford, Leeds, Everton, Burnley, they're probably the only people that are benefiting.
Yeah, and as you say, I think you're absolutely bang on. The system they built and this little partnership that Idah and Pookie were really starting to form was quite fun to watch. That's now just been snatched away from us, and from Dean Smith especially, which I'm sure will be frustrating him. And you look at last season, riddled with injuries, and a season we all had down as what would be his breakthrough season. This season, I think we questioned a bit, didn't we, if he was ready or not. And then over the past sort of month or two, really, as you said, started to come into his own, really started to find his feet, started to really sort of shine in terms of what we expected, what we knew was coming. We were being proven right. This powerful, quick, agile striker. Not, he should have probably scored 2 or 3 goals more, but that doesn't matter. You could see there was clearly a player there, which when you're a Norwich City fan, you've got to look for any positives, haven't you? But now he's injured again. As you said, there are massive, massive games left for Norwich City. The season isn't done. I'm sure we're all kind of braced for relegation, but it's not done. And who do you want sort of at the forefront of your sort of charge to stay in the league? You want this young, hungry player paired with your experienced Timu Pukki. Dean Smith doesn't have that. A lot of people sort of turned and looked at the argument of should have brought someone in January. I personally am completely unfazed by it because I expected no signings. But it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you can also look at the January thing as at the time they were playing a lot of the time a one up front, and if you sign another striker, Idah is then potentially the fourth choice to start on his own up front, and probably doesn't start another league game for the rest of the season. So it's easy to look at things with hindsight and say, oh, we should have signed another player. But like I said, if they could have done that, and it could have gone the complete opposite way and had a really detrimental impact on Adam Idah and his development.
Yeah, I think we really, really missed him against Southampton. And it's the same for Liverpool. It's the same for Man City. But Southampton was a game that I had down as one we could have really won.
Yeah.
And the Southampton press, very intense, very well structured. As someone who just loves teams who press, it was almost a joy to watch. And then you remember who it's against. But every time Gibson or Hanley was forced into a ball over the top, you've only got Sargent who 50-50 with headers. He's either going to challenge or he's going to actually win it. That gets you so far. When we had both Sargent and Idah in the team, especially Idah, because as a physical presence, he's massive, isn't he?
Yeah.
We didn't have that relief. So every time, which, we've spoken about how painful it is watching Norwich play those long balls, but against Everton, against Watford, it wasn't as bad, was it? Because Adam Idah would look to actually make something of them. Against Southampton, we missed that massively. But we can't rue too much because it just becomes a game of what if this, what if that, which is often the case with Norwich City. Let's talk about the games then, the Liverpool Man City game. Can we speak about them as a collective? I don't think we can, because Man City, the first 30, I thought Norwich were brilliant. Hit the post. Obviously, Man City did as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then they just kind of went, yeah, we'll win now. And watching Man City in person, by the way, is frightening. You see on TV how intense they are, how clever the movement is. But when you're watching it in the flesh and, you've not got camera angles crippling your view, it's like, how does any team defend against this? It's literally, the press is ridiculous, but also it's the stretching of the pitch, which frightened the life out of me. You had Sterling one side, Mahrez the other, every second of the game. Every single second of the game. And the thing is, with Norwich, when we'd get the ball, we would just panic. Rashica would occasionally have a little moment of magic, but I don't know how teams play against Man City. They're brilliant.
Yeah, I wasn't at that game. I watched it on TV, but I was at the other thrashing at the Etihad earlier in the season, and yeah, it's just unbelievable, really, the way that it feels like they have sort of 4 players for every 2 that Norwich have, almost all over the pitch. They take. It's almost like when you play at goals against these 5-a-side teams that have, these work teams that have clearly been playing together for about 15 years, and they find it easy. They just pass it around. It's like Man City have taken that and just multiplied it out across a massive Premier League pitch. And it is a shame that I have sort of Norwich tinted spectacles at times, because I think I would have just hugely appreciated that if it wasn't so terrifying. Yeah, I think it did start to look, after maybe 2-3-0, it just started to look a bit robotic and a little bit easy, and like there was nothing Norwich could do to stop it. But you're right, it was a spirited sort of first 20-30 minutes, and yeah, hitting the post was a highlight. Every time the ball went out for a corner on that side, I was thinking, oh, and Kenny always makes that front post run as well. So I was thinking if one of those could go right, but no, it didn't. And yeah, I mean, the best team, comfortably the best team over the 90 minutes won.
Yeah, and then the Liverpool game. I said earlier, for 60 minutes, I thought we were really good. Now, we conceded like high quality chances, but for Christ's sake, it's Liverpool. You know, what is crazy to me right now is they are the second best team in the Premier League. That Liverpool team should be the best. I think they've scored more goals than Manchester City. I think I can look at the table here. They've scored 6 more goals than Manchester City. So they're obviously going to create chances, especially against Norwich. But Norwich was so brave on the front foot, I thought. Brandon Williams had a bit of a wobbly start against Salah, but after that, he sort of kept clamping him for a good period of the game anyway. And the goal was fortunate, but it felt deserved, which was a refreshing feeling. But and I mean this, and I'm not just saying this with the beauty of hindsight. As soon as we scored, my fears shifted to just, well, how long until Liverpool score? At 0-0, I'm just kind of, oh my God, imagine if Norwich score. Imagine if Norwich score.
Yeah.
At 1-0, it's, oh, well, when are Liverpool going to ruin this day? Which I think is just rubbish. Like, it speaks volumes about the vast difference in quality in the Premier League and how ridiculous this gap is between the top 6 and the rest of us, and maybe more so the top and bottom half of the league now, because you've got teams like Wolves and West Ham sort of pushing for those top 6 positions. But it's just so bleak. And I have a point that I will touch on later, but that Liverpool game was just, it was actually heartbreaking. It really was.
Yeah. It's like you say, really. I think when you're waiting for that moment to happen rather than hoping that it doesn't, it does get a bit depressing. And it almost feels like, with the two teams we've just spoken about, Manchester City and Liverpool, it almost feels like a sort of Truman Show-like existence where the Premier League exists so that we can watch this battle between these two teams, and then all the rest is just fodder set up to sort of surround them and give context to their sort of fight. I suppose it's just because they're so good, and you've got to credit them with that. I think there was a fair amount of scapegoating going on with a pretty non-event in terms of Alisson sliding outside the box, and it would have been a yellow card and a crossing free kick that then people
apparently the rule said it would have been a red. I didn't know this.
No, I think the red, it only applies if it would be denying a goal scoring opportunity, and unless you can genuinely say that Pukki would have nicked it off him and finished from the tightest of angles and 20 yards out. I mean, yes, it's not really. But yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't in awe as much of that Liverpool team as I was of Man City, and they don't set up to play that sort of way. And I think they probably do open the door more to a team like Norwich and a bit more of a spirited performance. They don't really sort of kill you off in the same sort of cold, assassin-like manner that Manchester City do. And that probably allows you to enjoy the game as a spectator a little bit more. And it was definitely more enjoyable to watch and more sort of inspiring to watch. But yeah, like you say, it did get to a certain point where you thought, okay, when's Salah going to, put us out of our misery, and then eventually he did. So, yeah, just a display of how far the gap is. Really, it is enormous, and it got spelt out for Norwich fans in absolute clear detail over 2 weeks or 1 week, really. So that was fun.
Yeah. By the way, that Truman Show analogy is Remarkable. Get that in an article nice and quick. Unless you already have.
I've genuinely been trying for ages. I'm not joking. I've been thinking about different articles that I can use that in for so long. I think it's great, but thank you very much. I do appreciate that.
That's superb. 31 minutes. I'll go back and we'll clip that up and get that on Twitter. That is remarkable. Yeah, it's bleak, isn't it? I think Dean Smith will be incredibly frustrated at the nature of a lot of the goals we've been conceding lately. It's always the case with Norwich, isn't it? Cheap goals, and some more cheap goals. It's just, I don't know. As a coach, I don't know what you do to fix that other than get better players. Because who do you blame at this point for the silly cheap goals? Surely it's the individual. I'm just thinking of I don't know if it was Liverpool's second or third, where it's the massive ball from Alisson. You think, how is nobody dealing with that?
Yeah.
That's not off the training ground. That's just an individual at a moment in time, just not being very good. But it happens so often with Norwich, and it's one of the reasons that we are all just braced for relegation. Because you look at Everton, you look at Watford, and you think, yeah, there are some qualities there, but they're just so heavily outweighed by the clumsiness, the lack of ability, which is such a shame, isn't it? Because this group of players I really want to love,
Yeah.
because you can tell they care. I think Ben Gibson's a beautiful example of this.
True.
As a person, right, I watched his interview with Talk Norwich City. I just love him. I think he's wonderful. But on the pitch, he's got some good qualities, but there's just moments where I just think he's too slow. And there's not enough protection around him. It's the same for most players, to be honest with you. I think Brandon Williams is a great example. I love him, but I shouldn't, because he's not actually that great. I know he got Player of the Month, but he's so silly. The Southampton game, diabolical, which I thought was interesting. That he didn't get brought off for Janulis, but I'm convinced if Janulis had put that first 45 minutes in, he would have been executed, which is bizarre. But let's talk about the Southampton game. Really horrible, just bleak.
Yeah, do you know what it reminded me of was that, I mean, Southampton were definitely better, but that Leeds game, right towards the end of Farke's tenure, Norwich were just smashing balls forward and they weren't going to anyone, and the ball retention was appalling. And it just gave me so many flashbacks to that, and feeling almost hopeless, because if you play in that manner, you have to get a result, right? It's not like that was one thing Farke always had going for him, was that if you play Farke ball, right, you always have one positive in every single match. Even if you lose 10-0, you can always say, well, at least we played the right way. And I'm not saying it always justifies losing games, but at least it's one positive that you always have. If you play football like what they played against Southampton and lose, there's nothing good to take from the game, nothing to enjoy watching, nothing to feel pride in, no identity. And then you lose on top of it. You don't even trade all of those for points. You just lose. And it reminded me very much of that Leeds game when it felt very bleak. And it did once again watching that game on Friday night.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo your points. I don't want to talk about the Southampton game. Depressing. I'm not talking about that. Let's move on to our final question. What is next for Nodge? It's a very big question, isn't it? It's a very, very big question. And Woz makes a good point, which links to the point I'd like to make, which is Dean Smith has inherited a team that had players that didn't fit the original formation. And basically, we need to give him time to rebuild and create a philosophy, because this Dean Smith side doesn't have a philosophy at the moment. I've liked a lot of what I've seen. I've liked some of what I've seen so far in terms of Norwich being very efficient, which it felt quite new at getting the ball up the pitch. Everton was a very good example. Watford, not so much. Palace, for the first sort of 30 minutes, a very good example. Man City, first 30, good example. Liverpool, first 60, good example. But there's this thing where it starts with Hanley or Gibson or Gunn sometimes, who, by the way, Angus Gunn's been absolutely brilliant since he sort of came in goal, which has been a bit of a surprise, but he's been absolutely phenomenal. But there's been this efficiency to Norwich where it's been 1-2-3, and it's either Rashica running at someone, it's Sargent running at someone, and the quality of chances that have been created have been pretty good. It's just Timu Puki needs 4-5 of those a
Yeah.
game to score you one or two, whereas he's only been getting one or two. The Palace goal, phenomenal finish, phenomenal move. But Timu Puki, and this has been a thing throughout his Norwich City career, needs loads of those chances per game. What do you make of the rest of this season and maybe the larger picture of Dean Smith in terms of how do you think it will go? How do you think Norwich should approach to how we view Dean Smith in terms of patience, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that he's just inherited a squad that was built for a different head coach and probably a different style of play. I'll admit that I don't love watching this Norwich team too much, to be honest. I mean, I'm always entertained watching them because obviously you have that emotional connection with it, and just wanting a team to win always makes sport more watchable than any other element, really. But just if I didn't support Norwich, I would never ever watch them because it's not a good watch, and I'll be open about that. I don't want to be too harsh on Dean Smith because I think he's done a decent job. He's got a fair amount of points for a pretty poor squad in this division, and I suppose he's got to be commended for that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big summer, probably of adaptation and adapting to what Dean Smith wants out of a squad and out of a transfer window. I think that's going to be an important thing. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be spending more than they get in terms of sales, but I also expect the sales to be quite high. And yeah, hopefully he'll be given enough to spend to make it a squad sort of decent enough that he's happy with it. I think that most of us that have played Football Manager know that it's very difficult to sort it all out in one window, and especially with the sort of budgets Norwich are going to be working with in the summer. But maybe he can get to that sort of midpoint where you've got some players that are, you've got some players that are 2.5 stars still that you wanted to move on in the summer, but that nobody really wanted to buy. But you've also brought in a couple of 4-starers that have done a good job for you at previous clubs, and then eventually, hopefully, he can build it in. But I don't know how much time he should get. I don't know if you can really afford to write off a whole season in the Championship. But I also think this squad and probably the tatters this squad is going to be left in after that business is going to find it very difficult to get out of a tough division that hasn't looked so tough for Norwich fans the last 2 times they've been in it. But you look back at that 2017-18 season when they had James Maddison. Imagine if they didn't have James Maddison and they don't have that star player now. Imagine what that would look like. 2016-17, another example when the season after they got relegated, and I think they ended up finishing 8th, never really, after the first couple of months, never really threatened promotion too much. And I think there's a lot for him to do. So I wouldn't judge him too harshly if Norwich don't get promoted, but I also don't think it's a situation where you can really write it off and say, oh, it's a project, because the project was supposed to finish in Premier League survival this season and it hasn't. So it's difficult to judge, to be honest.
Yeah, it all leads to the same man, doesn't it? Stuart Webber and his role in what is to come. The argument of if his project failed or not. Let's not be silly and say now it's failed, because you've got to look at the broader picture. But I don't think we should do that until the end of this season. As you said, there's going to be a gutting of the squad in one way or another, whether it's teams picking off the players they want, whether it's us trying to get rid of a bunch of players. That's going to have to happen. Theoretically, and I think practically, in this model, it's going to have to be a Daniel Farke first season next season if we go down. It's going to have to be, clean slate, new players. These players might not be right for the system you think you want to play. Blah, blah, blah. We know the drill. Under this model, that's going to have to be the case, because we're not Newcastle. We can't go and spend 20, 30. We can't spend 20 million pounds on Chris Wood, for example, to just get you 5-10 goals for the rest of the season. Norwich can't do that, can they? So it's going to have to be another project. The bigger question, who's going to be leading that? Dean Smith? Don't know. Stuart Webber? We really don't know. You got a point there.
No, I was just thinking. I'm pretty sure Dean. That was a very weird sound from me.
You sound shocked. I was like, all right.
I'm pretty sure Dean Smith stays, but the
Yeah.
Stuart Webber situation is a very interesting one. Obviously, the contract was agreed upon, and we reported that and everything, that the contract was agreed and ready to go a long time ago, and then it got sort of semi-officially announced at the general meeting last year. But I think Michael Bailey reported a few weeks after that, or a few months after that, that yes, it's been agreed, but I'm not sure a pen has actually been put to paper. So maybe that door's still open. I don't know how he'd feel about it. If he'd feel like he was leaving without finishing, if he left without having ever presided over a Norwich team that stays in the Premier League. But also, is anyone really that keen to just keep doing the same thing? He's already had a whole cycle of rebuild. Rebuild the club, get rid of everyone, including staff, get loads of new people in, get promoted, get relegated, get promoted again. Does he really want to just keep going with that? And if I would say that this first generation of the project has failed if they get relegated, and it's about whether he wants to stay on for a sort of second generation of it, because it, like you said, it feels like we're going back to 2017, and all I'm saying is, if I was Stuart Webber, let alone responsibility. I'm not sure when we'll get into that, but I don't. Let alone responsibility and where to lay the blame. I'm not sure he'll see it as a great move for his career to just do it all again. To be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to question whether he'd be up for it. We talk about what we want. Maybe he'll go, yeah, do you know what? Fair enough, it's not worked. I'll go and do something else now, which is, I guess, totally fair enough. It's a weird one, isn't it? We're right, I think, in terms of we are looking at sort of 2017 again, but Norwich in a much stronger position, aren't they, in terms of the things that they prioritised for those first few years, the academy, training ground, blah, 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 blah. But you can't help but just think the ownership's not going to change. It's going to have to be another rebuild. Season ticket prices are going up. Starting to test our patience again. And I know for myself, I'm sure it's the same for you. I know it's the same for 95% of Norwich City fans. But there's going to be that question in your mind of just, can I be bothered? The answer is yes, because we're idiots. But the testing of the patience is there, which I'm a bit on edge. I'm just going to do my best to kind of enjoy the rest of the season. I'm still in a position where I really enjoy going to Carrow Road just because I remember what it was like not going for so long.
I thought you were going to say, I thought you were going to be like, oh, I like going to Carrow Road because I remember what it was like when it was good. Like, I like to go for the reminiscence.
No, Christ, no. No, more depressing than that, which I think is the bloody pandemic. But I'm still in that position. I'm sure that sort of luxury thought process will leave me eventually, but I'll enjoy it whilst it lasts. It's a weird time to be a Norwich City fan at the moment. I still love Dean Smith. I adore him. I don't really know why, but up the Dino is what I say. Lovely ginger beast.
Is he ginger?
He was. His eyebrows are still ginger, but before his hair went grey, he was a ginger fox.
That is proper commitment to the finding other gingers cause from you.
Well, do you not notice his big, thick ginger eyebrows?
I don't look at people's eyebrows that much, to be honest. I mean, maybe I don't know.
Well, do you not notice them?
No.
If things
honestly,
are ginger, they tend to get noticed. I can tell you that from first-hand experience. But
no, I just think you're hyperactive on trying to look
for
other ones.
Yeah.
Which I understand. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying
other ones.
Play. I'm just saying fair play because you're very diligent, and I appreciate that quality in you.
It's super.
So well done.
It really is. It's super. Thank you. Honestly, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
if I ever notice another pair of ginger eyebrows, I'll let you know, just because apparently it's an impressive skill.
Yes.
Next time you see us, because we're calling it a day there, I've had enough of thinking about Norwich. I've somewhat enjoyed the past month of when Norwich have finished playing, going and enjoying life, doing other things.
Yes. Yeah.
It's been very pleasant, but also at the same time, miss talking about Norwich. Next time you see us, and Norwich playing Wednesday or Tuesday. I should really know that. Wednesday. We might do a preview video just because, get back on the grind. It's a game that, Christ, I speak for both of us. I really want to win it. I want another quarter final, not against Man United where we lose in the 115th minute to Harry Maguire, but I would very much like that opportunity, especially to be there again. Because for the Man United game, we were supposed to be there at Carrow Road, weren't we? It would have been a massive game, but we had that taken away from us, didn't we? Hopefully, we beat Liverpool, get drawn at Carrow Road, and finally get to experience that, what will likely be a once in a lifetime thing, with Norwich City.
Once in a lifetime, the FA Cup quarter final.
At Carrow
that would
Road.
be quite depressing.
No,
Yeah, maybe.
Let's not act like it's not true though. Like that'll definitely be a thing.
Not once in. I don't know how long you're planning on living, but I mean,
it depends how the season goes, mate.
I've opened the door right up for you there. We should be a comedy duo. That was perfect.
Great.
Right.
Superb. Any pieces, any Truman Show related pieces coming out soon?
No, but now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna write it. I'm gonna write about the terrible state of the Premier League, and I'm gonna put that Truman Show thing in there. So
bang that on the CV.
Absolutely. Next couple of days, some sort of reference to the Truman Show. Maybe I'll write only about the Truman Show, and Gary will refuse it to my football writer.
No.
So look out for TrumanShowWords.com, which is where I will be moving my wonderful writing.
TrumanShowWords.com. You heard the man. Go and search that up and see what you find. That sounds like it must be a website. Anyway, to not bottle the ending. Next time we see us, as I said, Tuesday, and then I'm sure when we win, a nice live after the FA Cup dub. So until then, see you again very, very soon.